And it's a true pleasure as well to welcome Stephen Heppell. Stephen is the Felipe Segovia Chair of Learning Innovation at the Universidad Camilo José Cela in Madrid. Stephen is a global leader in the fields of education technology and physical learning space design, founder of Heppell.net, a learning policy and project consultancy. As you know, Stephen is a frequent speaker at education conferences and events like the BET Show. Stephen, it's a true pleasure having you with us for the closing keynote today. The floor is yours for the next 30 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for still being here, and hello to people that are watching this on a catch-up video, because I guess people will be seduced off by the football as well at some point in all this. So look, we got half an hour, and my, what a decade it is ahead of us. I mean, I've been teaching a long time. These are genuine wrinkles here, but there's nothing in my career comparing to the 10 years ahead of us. So let's get started and let's think about it. I mean, let's talk about technology for a moment. And I'm surrounded by it here. You know, I'm still a professor. There's a lot of geeky stuff lying around here. What have we got? There, a Google Glass. I can stream live video to you. I've got a headset here. Lets me control my computer with my mind waves, which is interesting. I've got some little tiny robots left from the sort of history of all this, and yet, technology hasn't quite made the impact it should have made. I chaired the Education Technology Action Group for the UK government. Michael Gove, David Willett set it up, asked me to look at it, had a team of people for a year, and probably our biggest conclusion was that something's got to move out of the way if we're going to do all the things we hope to do with technology. Well, something has moved. And dear old COVID is the thing that's moved it. I mean, just a catastrophe in terms of the deaths, in terms of the impact on the economy. But in terms of a change in the world, it's a really, really interesting time. I've talked to, I think, 103 ministers of education in the last 14 months, which is a lot, you know. I don't have a collective noun for them all, but none of them are malicious, but they sure as heck are confused. But what's happened to the huge number of children, 1.5 billion children locked out of their schools by COVID, 1.5 billion children. What's happened to them has been really, really interesting. Firstly, well, let me take you back a little bit to the very early days of all this. And some of you are old enough to remember the very, very early days when we were building computers from wood and making up printed circuit boards and goodness knows what else. We just about got the things working, and we said to ourselves, I wonder if there's anything we're doing that technology could do a little better. I wonder if technology could help with teaching the time, or maybe some of those very early spreadsheets might give us an insight into the difference between geometric and arithmetic progression or whatever, you know. And we kind of harnessed technology to the things that we were already doing. I was part of teams doing things like this, making, I've been getting some of this stuff out for you, tools for multimedia, you know. Teachers were going to have multimedia in the classroom. They'd better have the tools to be able to build it, because nobody else was building it for them, you know. And it took a long time to get things working. But what we saw starkly from day one was that when you put technology into learning, children took risks with their learning they hadn't previously been able to take. I mean, even at the level of writing, you know, if you're having to longhand everything on a book with a pen and you want to go back and change the order of your paragraphs or insert a few, you know, fronted adverbials or whatever, you want to change you're writing, that's hard work in pen world, but it's really easy work in computer world, because you can cut and paste and delete and save and do all those other things. So kids had a go at things thinking, well, I don't know if it's going to work, but I'll give it a try. Education didn't do that. I don't think we were brave enough, certainly schools weren't brave enough in saying, let's take a risk here, let's really go for it. And yet, if I look back on the projects that I've been involved in my lifetime, and you know, Tesco's SchoolNet was the biggest internet learning project in the world in the Guinness Book of Records. When we launched Talking Heads, that online community of head teachers, 23,000 head teachers all online. This is way before Facebook or social media. Those projects, I used to go home at night, still living in the same place. I used to go home and think, oh my Lord, Stephen, what have you done? You know, what have you done? And I'd wake up in the night in a cold sweat, you know. It was only the things that terrified me that were brave enough to show us how good technology might be in terms of our learning. There's a reason for that. Computers are really good at some things. People are really good at other things. What are computers good at? Well, they're very good at rule-based systems. You know, writing a program is a rule-based system. They're very good at remembering things. You know, I've got hard disks all over the place here, in the USB drives. Computers are fab at remembering things. They're good at matching things. Here's a face, here's another one like it. They're good at batch processing. Do that, okay, now do it again. They're good at doing what they're told, you know, turn them on, turn them off. They don't say, hang on a minute, chief, you know, they just go off. And they're very good at being consistent and at repetition. Unfortunately, a lot of what we've been doing in education over the years, and I'll come back to the time of that, has been looking at repetition and consistency, rule-based systems and remembering and matching things and batch processing. We were doing with the kids the things that computers were going to be really good at. So what are people good at? And where does that fit in the education system? People are really good at ingenuity, solving complex problems together. They're pretty good at creativity. They're very good at deep understanding. At this point, it's quite hard to build a computer that does deep understanding, although, to be fair, at this point, I'm probably reading more quantum computing papers than anything, and I think computers might be pretty good at that soon as well. People are really good at collaborating, working together. They're good at curiosity, thinking, I wonder. And they're very good at they rather enjoy fresh challenges. So here we are, we're in a world where people are good at ingenuity and curiosity. Computers are good at doing what they're told and repetition. It makes sense to put those two together. And what happened with COVID was really interesting, because I was kind of upset by all the stuff that was appearing in the newspapers about the catch-up generation and children had been out of school for a year or whatever, and the BBC here, the fools, talked about a lost generation, you know, the lost generation of children. You know, I mean, we know that when Christchurch had that fearful earthquake some years back, I had a research lab in Christchurch. We know that after the kids were excluded from school by the earthquake, their results went up, you know. So there isn't a lot of evidence to suggest that kids chucked out of school are going to go backwards. So I instigated a little thing that some of you might have been to, because tens of thousands have. This little certificate here, which is, you can find it if you go to heppell.net/golden, heppell.net/golden. It simply says to children, well, you've been out of school for a while. What have you done? What have you done? And the kids type in what they've done, and it generates this lovely certificate that says some very flattering things about them. But I get the data set of all the things the kids have done. And I'll tell you what, when it comes to understanding the impact of technology on learning. Data is everything. Some of you might be watching the football later tonight. The head of data in Liverpool Football Club has 11 full-time data analysts working with him, and he has a PhD in theoretical physics. They know so much more than we do about the data of their profession. I'll come back to that in a moment. What we saw from the data, many of you will have seen anecdotally from your own lives. Kids went for depth, not breadth. Schools had said, okay, let's kind of do all this, and next year, on we go, we'll do this, and then on we go. Kids didn't do that. Kids said, you know what, I'm fascinated by space, or I'm fascinated by sailing, or look, here's my granddaughter, Josephine, or there's a better picture of her. Here's Josephine sailing a little boat. She's only 6 then, I think, during lockdown. She's passed all her qualifications up to being a sort of mid-aged teenager, because she just sailed her socks off, you know. And in fact, she did so well that the national authority bought her a boat. The National Olympic Authority said, blimey, you're doing well, we'll buy you a championship-ready boat, you know. Other kids pursued. I was talking to a parent a little while back, and she said, my son's done nothing that he was asked to do by his school at all, nothing. On the other hand, he's just replumbed our entire house, and he's working on the neighbour's bathroom. He's 13. You know, so kids went for things in real depth. You can just about behind me see there on top of the pinball machine, you can see a rocket. Where is it? A rocket there. My other granddaughter, 5 and they're 7 now, became obsessed by space, you know, and we were doing a lot of interesting things in space, including, by the way, mixing our own gunpowder to propel the rockets into space. Not sure I should be telling you this, but it did not go off with a whoosh. Learning escaped during COVID. Learning escaped from the structures and strictures we built around it, from the fact that you had to pursue a broad curriculum, and kids didn't want to do it. They went for depth. And not all of it was pleasant. I mean, some of those kids became carers. They were looking after mothers. They were looking after the family, feeding and washing for their siblings. You know, they took on those deep responsibilities and pursued them. Now, this is really interesting, because 75 years before COVID, exactly, we had the end of World War II. And the end of World War II, children had the most torrid time. You know, they'd been evacuated, you know, from their homes. They went into school for a week, carrying their little satchels, thinking, I wonder if today's the day I'm going to be evacuated to Wales. And then, you know, Thursday, the bus turned up, they got on the bus, went to Wales, didn't see their parents for a year and a half, you know. Or they went down the underground to shelter from the bombers. Excuse me, let's have a quick swiggle. It's water, it's not rum. They had the most torrid time. And when they emerged, they had resilience, they had the ability to cope with the unexpected, and they had the certainty that they didn't need to do it the old way. And that generation, of course, was, well, you'd know them as the Beatles, as Vivienne Westwood, as Clive Sinclair, Colin Chapman, you know, a generation of people who were children during the war, and for whom that extraordinary experience transformed them into a golden generation who saved post-war Europe. This generation are the golden generation, the COVID generation. Remember, twice as many people have died in England from COVID as died during the Blitz. So this is a far worse thing than the war was for them. This generation are going to be intolerant of being put back in their boxes. You watch. Now, that's very interesting, because suddenly we've got the most extraordinary technologies coming along, and they allow us to do learning better. Let's have a look at a couple of examples you can go off and do tomorrow in your classroom of how that might be. First of all, let's go back to that data thing, the huge amounts of data that football players, elite sports stars have. I'm lucky enough to do learning with I do learning with some of the elite sports. Here's the British Olympic hockey team. You can see they work today in something that looks a lot like one of our modern primary classrooms. We're teaching, we've got material on the floor, on the desks, all the walls are writable. You know, you can they're sitting on tiered seating, facing the problem, and the teacher, who you can just about see over here, the teacher has stood back to introduce the problem. Sorry, I got out of a bit of rubbish in front of the camera there, you can't see. You can see what's going on there. So what we learned from them was that aggregation of marginal gains, that everything mattered. And what we got from technology was the ability to look at the details in our classroom. Let's look at a couple. So here's noise. Here's noise in the classroom, and things falling in front of the camera here. This is the yellow line is one of those huge classrooms with lots and lots of kids in, 90s plus 97 kids, I think. They come in the morning, they talk loudly, they get on with the vertical axis is decibels. This is the school day from here to here. And you can see that they get into a model of mutuality and self-help very quickly. And then there's a little plenary before lunch, they go to lunch, they come back, more noise as they chat about their lunch, and then they're quiet and they go home. The other class, which is a traditional classroom, well, we see this every single time. They come in, they don't say much because they've got a seating plan. They don't even bother to turn to the person next door. Hello, James, how are you? You know, they've done all that 2 terms ago. And then they start getting disengaged as they get towards lunch. Noise, be quiet, quite a lot of noise. They have to go to lunch. And the school said they have to go to lunch early because teenagers can't concentrate for a long morning. Well, they clearly can because the other lot are. And then after lunch, they come back and it's noisy, shut up, noisy, shut up, noisy, shut up, noisy, shut up, noisy, sod off, go home, you know. So there's not a lot of learning going on there, and we can see that. You just rig your phone as a decibel meter, but of course, we can give that data to the kids and say to the kids, hey, guys, you know, you're in charge, you sort this out. If the classroom's getting noisy, I'm looking for you to help, because I'm going to nominate a couple of you as, look, here's a couple in Islington. I'm going to nominate you as noise monitors. There's a decibel meter running on an old tablet. If it stays below the orange all morning, we'll go to lunch 5 minutes early. If it gets up too near the orange, these two, the day's noise monitors, will come and shush everybody down and quieten them down. Or here's, let's have a look at CO2, which is pretty hideous in the classroom. So here's CO2. This is a typical classroom with the door shut. Technology gives us the ability to measure the CO2 and look at it. They come in the morning, they breathe, the CO2 goes up, they go out for break. Not much CO2 goes out, heavy gas, keeps on building up to lunchtime. Lunchtime, they go out for lunch. The afternoon, even with the windows open, CO2 stays high. At the end of the day, it finally drops. The yellow line on this graph is the point below which your brain is working optimally. Above that yellow line, the classroom is damaging you. So this is extraordinary. When we started using our technology to analyze the learning environment, we found out bluntly how bad it was. And it didn't matter what else we looked at, it was always pretty bad. So then we started, as you will have heard from the panel session before, we started saying loud and clear to the kids, I'll tell you what, kids, you design the space. You know, here's a challenge, here's the space you're working in. You design it. This is in Madrid, where we gave the kids carte blanche to redesign their entire space. They put a great big sign on the door, which we'll look at in a minute, but they've got no budget at all. The interactive screen is cardboard. The 3-dimensional space in the corner is made from chicken wire and paper. the curtain here should go right across, but there isn't enough material because there was no money. So there's just a marker for where the curtain is. The head teacher here has come in because he's amazed to find children standing in front of a cardboard interactive screen, articulating what's there. But he's come in, good old Phil, because the learning in the room was better, significantly better. Any which way you measured it, they arrived on time earlier. They stayed later. Their academic results went up. Their engagement, their delight, their smiles, their collaboration. If you could measure any which way, just measure it from the mutuality of their language, all the I's and me's giving way to us and we's. The learning was better, and it's flipping cardboard. What's going on here, of course, is the kids are role-playing better learning. They've decided to rise to the challenge, and they're role-playing what better learning might be in the future. Now, I don't know how long you think their patience is going to last of pretending to be in the future when they could actually be in the future. So we gave them a bit of an incentive, and we said, look, here you go, folks. Here's quite a lot more cardboard, since you seem to like cardboard, you know. And here's a space in the university. Have a go. I'm just sort of glancing sideways, so I've got all these backgrounds racked up over here, which is a nice way to use Zoom, I think. So we said, here's a space. Let me try and find you a good example of this in the tiny amount of time we've really got left. So we challenged them. We said, okay, convert this university space into something that you would want to attend as a university student. And you can see they built the entire place in cardboard. And so, well, something like this, please, Chief, you know. And then these were 13 and 14-year-olds, you know. So we said, okay, if that's what you want, we'll build it. We will actually build that space for you and see how well it works. So this is learner design, full on the student agency. This isn't co-construction. We're not doing it with them. We're asking them to do the research of determining what makes great learning and just moving ahead. And here's obviously we built it for them. Here it is. And this isn't unfamiliar. I mean, here's a little tiny coastal community school. I've been working in Essex, just down the road, and look at the variables in place here. Look how bright the light is. Lux levels of 500 or above. This classroom's built to 1,000. Hugely reflective, white writable surfaces, zoned spaces, the tiered seating you saw with the university athletes, the screens absolutely everywhere. And by the way, you know, when I say this is everywhere, this really is everywhere. Here's our government in the UK at the moment all went to a very posh school. Here's Eton. And you'll see just the same components falling into place there. So this is really interesting, because what's even better than doing up your own space, what's even better is being out of doors. So here's a group of children that are doing learning out of doors. They're doing maths. I'm not saying go out of doors to do gym and climbing walls. Go out of doors to do your learning. And we know how good that can be, because we've seen things like, well, in the little town that I live in here, we have a thing called the Re.school, where the children, and this is run by my daughter, so I know all about it, the children come to the beach to do their outdoor learning. I'm just trying to find you a picture of the blighters. Actually, here's a group in Denmark. You wonder why the Denmark footballers are so brave. This is a primary school, and the children are climbing trees. The trees are in the middle of a dual carriageway going past the school, and there's no ropes. They just climb up there. When I said to the teachers, isn't that a bit dangerous? They said, no, there are trees everywhere. If we didn't teach them to climb trees safely, think of the danger they'd be in. So, you know, spilling our learning out of doors into the community really, really, really starts to matter. And that means we can start taking the walls down. This is Linfield Learning Village. And oh, look, I'm actually wearing that shirt. I do have more than one shirt, but in New South Wales, just outside Sydney, is a school where the kids all have an individual timetable. It's a stage, not age school. They go fast as they like. They don't have to wait till they're 15. They want to get on with it, they can do it. And that's the sort of learning kids discovered for themselves during COVID with a whole range of technologies. Now, a few last minutes. Let me just say three things in conclusion, really, because, gosh, we're so short of time. Firstly, none of this is expensive. When you move your learning out of doors, here's a professional development class I'm running for a group of teachers. When you move your learning out of doors, it's cheap. Secondly, the CO2, the TVOCs, the microparticulates, the temperature, the oxygen, everything heads towards optimal. And the beach school kids here in Brightlingsea are on the beach all the year round. You know, they're there 12 months of the year. They say famously, as others have said before them, there's no such thing as bad clothes, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. Look, here they are. Go to beachschool.org if you want to visit it. Interestingly enough, when we started bringing the outdoors indoors, when we put plant walls into 162 classrooms in Dubai, Asher Alexander was the head teacher that did all that work. The data we got back was remarkable. The CO2 was sucked down. Here's the data for academic performance. Here's the academic performance by subject. In each case, the after dramatically better than the before. So all this really, really works. And the big thing here is going right back to what I was saying at the beginning. That question, what are we going to do with technology that we were struggling to do before, goes out of the window. What comes in is the challenge of what would you like to do? Just what would you like to do with your learning? And, you know, it turns out that's a really interesting question. But I'll tell you for nothing, what kids say in answer to that question is more, faster and further. We were asking a group of children in Scotland, just after lockdown had got going. I said, hold up your 5 hands and tell me, how many days a week you think you need to come to school to still be part of the community and get some work done and still have a bestie, you know, but so you can get on with some proper work, undisturbed, really get your head down and go for it at home, maybe with others. So if you think it's 5 days, do that. If you think it's 4 days, do that. The average was 2. And we're building a school in Cork at the moment, which is modeless, doesn't really care whether you come to school or not. You're still going to be doing your project-based work with a group of others. You're still going to be collaborating online with a group of others. You're still going to be doing your international baccalaureate. Your parents could go and live in Switzerland for a month or a term or a year. You'll still be part of that school. So schools starting to mirror the employment you see all around you is coming at you like an express train. The walls of learning have got softer and they've got lower. Any place where you thought or the government thought we could box in learning has gone. Learning has escaped. And the only question for us really is, do we pick up the technology and run with it, or do we try and corral it back and get it back in the boxes it was in before? Well, I'll leave you with this lovely little box that's, you know, because teachers are still full of lovely ingenuity. This is my other daughter's school. She's head teacher down in Dorset. A reception class came into school one day. There's a box in the middle of the classroom, and they didn't know what it was. And it said on it, Robot Repair Centre. And they were, oh, that's unusual. You know, they struggled a bit to read, their only reception. And then the box started talking to them. Hello, Stephen. Glad to see you in today. How's your dog? Oh, hello, James. You're back from visiting your uncle. Did you have a good time? We're really pleased to see you back. The box seemed to know who they were and all about them. And the box said, look, I'm the robot that does all the work in school. When you go home, I do all the jobs in school that need doing. And I'm broken. So you'd better think about what all those jobs are and start building some robots to do those jobs. And of course, what the box really was there was a Bluetooth loudspeaker in the box, and my daughter was sitting there with her phone, you know, typing things, and whatever she typed in the phone, the box said. Children's imagination took them on a journey, not into the box, but into how learning might be better with all these robots they were designing at night. That's where we are. We're in that world of ingeniously trying to think what learning tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow looks like. And for me, the exciting thing about it is all those kids around the world who got no learning at all because they've got no schools, 25 million kids in Pakistan have not got 1 million teachers to teach them and haven't got 25,000 schools to be in anyway. Those kids are going to have an extraordinary chance at learning, and they are the kids who are going to be leading the charge. We're going to be tearing up our legacy systems expensively and saying, how can we do this better? They're going to say, well, I'll tell you what, we never had a chance of doing it the way the West did it. Let's just reinvent it from scratch. And their learning will be grounded in their communities, will be relevant, will be full of deep knowledge and curiosity and ingenuity. And I cannot wait to see how good this decade's going to be. Go back to your schools and your classrooms. Start looking at the data. Start looking at as much data as you can collect. And say to yourself, how might we build the classroom of tomorrow? And I'll leave on the wall behind me the sign that's on the wall of the classroom where the kids built it, all in cardboard. And the permanent sign says, under construction. It's never going to be finished. The student's voice, their agency, their research, not their opinions, but their research into the science of learning is changing that classroom day by day, year by year. That's where we are, folks. The most fun you're ever going to have in your career. Well, the most fun you're going to have with your clothes on anyway. So with that, I'd better leave you to the football. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you so much. The last year has been difficult for many of us.
Of course.
It's really wonderful to see and to conclude today with such a positive message that technology can really improve the way children learn and the opportunities children will have in the future. That's really wonderful. I want to hand over to James just for one question. James had one question for you, Stephen, before we go to football. Spare 2 more minutes and then
listen, I'm not going to watch the football anyway. I'm a sailor, but you can ask as much as you like.
James, one question and we have to conclude.
I never get tired of hearing you speak, Stephen. Just a question with the big data. In the first round, we had Simon Walker, and he said that AI personalized teaching can undermine metacognition by kind of suggesting and preempting the next learning steps. So just interested to know your opinion on that.
Well, of course. I mean, if it's inappropriately harvested, you know, if it's trying, I mean, basically anything you do to the children is going to damage learning. Anything you do with them is going to be not so bad. And anything you give them agency to do themselves, it's going to be stellar. You know, so what you do with the AI, and one of the things you can do is, well, I mean, for example, here's a simple example. In Spain, we've said to all our parents in a group of schools I'm working with there, we've said, look, parents, you send your kids to our school. In exchange, we're going to support any course you want to do at all. So, you know, if you want to do a course on well-being, or you used to be in a retail department, but now you want to retrain as a Python programmer, or actually you want to do a degree because you're a stay-at-home parent, we'll support that. We'll pay for the courses. We'll do the whole thing. And by the way, we're running an AI engine across 2 things. One is people's adoption of those courses across the whole of Spain, actually across the whole of Europe. So we can tell you what courses is worth doing. So never mind telling you which answers are worth giving. We'll tell you which things are worth knowing, which are much more useful, you know. And also we can help you to see what others like you are doing that they find useful. You know, you think when I get in an Uber cab, you know, the driver rates me, I rate the driver, and there's a nice little algorithm that runs and influences when I should get picked up and if I should get picked up. That's going to apply to teaching and learning. But you see what happens when people take an idea and say, let's apply it to what we're already doing. You know, here's an exam question. Let's put AI into that. Oh, you've done the wrong answer. Let me give you 3 more like it. And that's utter tosh, because that's not what we want children to be good at. We want them to be good at deep knowledge, applying the knowledge, being creative and ingenious. You don't get that from AI. What you get from AI is the ability to do it better, because we give you the, you know, going back to the football thing for a minute, you know, if you look at the rugby, which I do follow, you'll see on the back of every single player, the little box on the back of their shirt. I've got one here actually. Yeah, box on the back of their shirts, that is telling you how fast they accelerate, how many passes they've helped with, what sort of speed they've gone, what distances they've covered, what their oxygen rate is in their bloodstream. I mean, just something like 10,000 data points per second sucking off the back of their shirts. We've done none of that in education, none of that, and we do need to. There's an equity issue here. You know, you sit a bunch of kids down in an exam room, and the kids on the dark, hot, badly ventilated side are going to do 5 to 7% worse than the kids on the sunny, ventilated, cool side. Now, if I was a parent, I'd go to court and say, you put my kid over here, you damaged his life chances. So we are going to have to respond to information, because it'll be the kids' information, not ours. And we'll look at the aggregates, the kids will look at theirs. Together, we can do something fabulous. But some dumb AI engine trying to make the answers a little bit harder, it's exactly the foolish thing that people would have done if they didn't have any ingenuity or imagination. Our kids have got those 2 things.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. Greetings to the UK.
Bye now, everybody.
Bye-bye.